Welcome to the Radiant Visalia podcast. Join us at one of our two services, 9 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. Download the Church Center app or visit our website, radiantvisalia.com, to stay connected with us. All right, enjoy.
There is a heavenly city that I'm compelled to find.
What's up, church? Good morning. Like you said, my name's Shannon Running. A few weeks ago when Travis asked me what my life first was, number one, I had no idea that I'd be doing this. And number two, I didn't know what to choose from because there's been so many throughout my life. So after looking through the highlights in my Bible, I was drawn to this one, and it's come to it time and time again over the past few years of my life. And it's Psalm 119, verse 71 and 72. And it reads, "It was good for me to be afflicted, so that I could learn your statutes. Instruction from your lips is better for me than thousands of gold and silver pieces." It's kind of an obscure verse. I know it's not like your typical coffee mug verse or anything like that, but it's one that rings true in my life over the past few years. Now, there's so much that I would like to share with you about my life. I've got a pretty gnarly testimony. I can't tell you my whole life story this morning, so what I'm going to do is fast forward to a point in my life when this verse first began to impact me. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Vicky. We have 6 amazing children. One is actually a son-few. He's our nephew, but he's our son. The other 5 are our biological children. Our 4th child, our son Isaiah, he was born with a condition called microcephaly, and he also has cerebral palsy and a number of other complications. When he was born, we didn't know what to expect. It was a very frightening time in our life. We didn't know if we could do this. And we would soon learn, too, that he wasn't able to eat on his own. When he was eating, it was getting him sick. So he had to get a surgery and get a G tube put in his stomach, and he's now fed through a tube in his stomach. And it was during this time and many nights in the hospital and crying out to God that we began to ask a lot of questions like, why? Why did this happen? Why to us? Why is our son going to have to suffer? And then it became also, too, about like what? Eventually we were like, okay, it doesn't matter why. What now? What are we going to do now? Now that we know our son, this light's hotter right now than it was earlier, but now that our son, now that our son is the way that he is going to be this way, what now? And then that evolved into who? Who is this about? Well, we would realize that this was not about us, that this was about God and him getting glory. One of these nights in the hospital, we were by our child's bed and we were praying, and I was just laboring in prayer for my son, wondering if he was going to make it and stuff, and the Lord said, stop, look around you, and look in this room. We were in this room where there was a bunch of incubators with babies, and he said, how many parents have you seen in here with these other children? Well, there had been one teenage girl that had came in and held a baby for a little while, and then that was it. And so he said, can you step outside of yourself and put other people before you? He said, see, Isaiah has you. He has your wife. He has me. You have me. They have no one. Can you step outside of yourself and pray for these other kids? And so I began to walk around the room, and I began to lay my hands over the incubators, and I'd pray for these kids. Hardest thing to do was to walk away from my son. But I said, okay, Lord. So I walked around and began to lay my hands over these incubators and praying for these different kids. And then, one of the nurses walked in, and I was like, she goes, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing, just praying, I was just praying with the kids, and she says, oh, okay. So, that would begin a course where a lot of ministry would begin to take place in these hospitals, in the hospital at Valley Children where we would stay. And there was one occasion, actually, where we even were able to pray with this couple who their child was going to die. they wanted to receive the Lord's salvation. And so over their child's bed, we were able to pray with them. And a couple of days later, that baby died. And the thing that's amazing about that is we're still in contact with those people today. The church we were part of back then, we actually did the service for them. We did the funeral for the baby. But we're still in contact today, and they're today still serving Jesus. So that's an incredible thing that took place from the suffering of our child. One of the things I believe that God wanted to teach us during this time was to trust in Him, to trust in Him and to have compassion on the people around us. That is a lesson that I've relearned time and time again because I'm by nature a selfish person. I'm probably the only one in this room that is a selfish person, but I am a selfish person. I'll be transparent about that before you right now. But the Lord was teaching us to think about others. That wasn't the only lesson that He was going to teach us through the life of my son, Isaiah. I think something really impactful was one day when a friend came over, he said, he came to pray. I hung out with him a lot. He's a pastor back in Kansas now, but he came over and he looked at my son and his eyes filled with tears, and he just said, man, I was sharing with him, hey, here's what the Lord's been teaching us. It's not about us, it's about Him. And he just kind of got teary-eyed and he said, if we could be like Isaiah before God. I had no idea what that meant. I was like, dude, that's heavy, bro, yeah. But I really didn't know what that would mean until lots of meditating on that. And over time, I would learn that it speaks of the father heart of God. That just as my son, Isaiah, is there before us with nothing to offer, with only being able to receive, so we stand before God with nothing to offer and only able to receive from Him. I mean, if we ever had anything to offer God, it's only because He first gave it to us. Whether it was love to give back or money to give back, He first gave it to us. And just as my son lies helpless before us, depending on us completely for his existence, for his meals, for his clothing, and even to breathe at times, so we too stand before God completely helpless and dependent on Him for all those same things and even more. There's never been a time that I've looked at my son when he's in need and said, help yourself. Get up. Change your own diaper. Feed yourself. Never once. I have said get up, but I was praying for healing, but that's beside the point. I never in a place where I could say, you can do this on your own, do it. Nor does God stand and look at us who are completely helpless before Him, who can't save ourselves, and say, do something and I will love you. Do something and I will save you. Help yourself and I'll help you. That's not the heart of God. No, He says, you are my son. You are my daughter. I've purchased you. I love you. And I want you. I don't think I would have understood that truth in the way that I do today had it not been for the suffering that we endured with my son. And I know that there are a lot of you that are out here today, and maybe you can't relate to my story because you don't have a son who's disabled, but I know that there are situations that you're in, and you're probably feeling confused. You probably feel paralyzed with fear. You probably don't know how you're going to handle these unexpected circumstances that have come your way. Maybe you're even angry with God. Maybe you're even questioning if He loves you. But I want to say that He would tell you today the same things that He shared with us, that He loves you, that you're His son, you're His daughter, and He wants you, and He hasn't left you. Now, in around this time in my life, we helped a friend plant a church. This was a really cool time in life, Our son was staying healthy pretty consistently, and we helped a friend plant a church. And there was a lot of talk, it was an exciting time. We were doing funerals and weddings, and, I was teaching and stuff, and it looked like I was going to become a pastor, and that began to really, fit me well, I thought. I could see myself being a pastor, and that didn't turn out the way I had hoped. The things we had discussed didn't pan out quite so well because one day we had an argument, and I got a little heated. And so I was asked to take a seat for a little while, take a little break, bro. I mean, it was done in grace and love, but I took it to the heart, and I wanted to fight, I was like, come. It became my identity, and I got depressed, and I got really bitter. It crushed me, It crushed me that we had labored together, and I was having to take a break. I mean, it was just a break. He wasn't saying you're done. It was just a break, but I was crushed. It really rocked me. In around that time, I also had a conversation with a different friend who is a pastor of this church. It's part of this movement that I really love. And we were talking, and he said, bro, over a meal, he says, hey, tell me your life story. So I told him my life story, which meant basically I complained to him about what happened. And then I had this great idea. You guys, what's a perfect city for your movement? Fresno. You guys should send someone to Fresno, and then I'll drive every Sunday with my family from Porterville, and we'll help establish this church. And it was like revelatory. Oh, dude, we were just praying over a map of the Central Valley, and Fresno's a city that we were honed in on. You should be the one to plant it. I'm like, I'm not that guy. I'll help that guy, but I'm not that guy. I got to tell you, it did seem like a dream that this movement that I so adored would invite me to plant a church. I felt like I was being rescued. I lost all hope in things that had become my identity. And then that this church, this movement that I love would invite me to plant a church and rescue me from this misery I was in. It seemed like a dream. Imagine this. Imagine the Youngs a few months ago, Mike and his wife, and not where they are right now, but where they were a few months ago when they moved to Missouri and stuff like that, or Kansas, I don't remember. Missouri, I think, yeah. And so imagine them in their situation. That was us. We had said, okay, look, at first as I rejected that idea, I eventually prayed about it. I said, okay, let's do it. So I short sold my house. I got a job up in Northern California, and I moved to Stockton. That was our lives. We were like in the seat of where the Youngs were. Well, that first year was incredible. I was learning things about grace that I hadn't known before. I was letting go of certain types of legalism in my life and all kinds of different stuff, and then it wasn't very long-lived. Came to find out that we weren't going to be able to plant a church with that particular organization. And once again, I didn't know what to do. I was shattered. I mean, I was like, what is my life even about, I'm a truck driver, cool, but I just lost all hope again. And then to top it off, here I am in this place where my heart's growing sick and I'm full of bitterness. My son Isaiah gets sick again. Only now we're in Stockton. And since he's a baby, he's been going to Valley Children's Hospital. And they know him. I mean, he's 14 years old today, and the first nurse that ever helped him when we got to Valley Children's, she was still there 14 years later, and she remembered us, So they've known him since he was a baby. Well, we live in Stockton now, and so they fly him down to Stockton. Down to Fresno, to Valley Children's, and my wife's there with him, and I'm in Stockton with my other kids, trying to juggle a job and all these different things and come down on the weekend. So eventually we shipped the kids down here to stay with my mom and my sister, and it was in that time again where I began to cry out to God. I couldn't handle it anymore. That depression that I felt, that sick feeling, almost like when I was on drugs. That's what it felt like, And So we began to pray, and I just said, Lord, what are you going to do? And so he began to loosen up these knots in my heart, a little bit at a time. And it was during that time, too, that many of you might remember, but we would come and visit back at the small little place where you guys used to meet. We would come and visit on weekends. I'd come down to spend time with my family, and we'd bring my family down and spend time with my wife. And I'd say, come on, we got to get you out of the hospital. Let's go worship. And my mom comes to this church, and so we'd come and worship with you guys. And it was just during that time that I really felt like our time in Stockton is over, And so we need to pray about what we're going to do. Let's move to, SoCal, like Santa Monica or something. But we felt like we would come to Visalia. It's equal, And so we agreed that we would move, and we packed up, and we moved down here. Before I moved, Mark Condi met with me. I'd met in our visits. We met each other and stuff, and he said, hey, man, I'd like to get together with you. And I said, okay. So we met for coffee, and I said, yeah, it's a go. We're going to move down here. Can't wait. And he goes, hey, man, tell me your life story. And I'm like, man, the last time someone asked me what my life story was, it ended real bad. It changed my life, So I complained to Mark as well, as I did the first pastor. And then he told me, listen, man, you got to reconcile with those guys before you move down here. You don't want to bring that sickness with you down here, because then we're going to be in the crosshairs. I said, okay. So I prayed, and I met with my brothers up there, and the Lord did this miraculous restoration between us, because he's in that business. He likes to reconcile. And we've been here now for a year. In fact, it's a year and a week today that we've been here. And I've just been detoxing my soul, just getting rid of old ideas and old just stiffness and ugliness inside of me. And the Lord's just been taking all those things out and cleansing me. And I've just been able to sit back with no expectations and no promises or nothing, and just absorb God, And so the way that this verse would speak to me is, think about this. In verse 71, where it says, it was good for me that I was afflicted, so that I might learn your statutes. God showed me the whole time that we are afflicted, every single time, if we would cry out to him, he would show and continues to show us today an eternal perspective for a temporal suffering. He's always revealing Christ and his kingdom, even through the hardships of a child. You know that there were times, and this is going to sound weird because it was so freeing to me, but there were times when my son got so sick. One time he was on life support. He was in sepsis. He was swelled up where he didn't look like himself at all. And I didn't do this earlier because he wasn't here, but he's here. But they said he wasn't going to make it. And the hardest thing to do was to say, God, I know that you love us, and I know that you're good. And if you want Isaiah, you can have him so that he can stop suffering. And he had some kind of crazy, miraculous turnaround. And he's here with us today, quite a few years later. So he was causing me to conform to the image of Christ. He was teaching me about who he is and who I am in him. When it speaks about in verse 72, where it speaks about the instruction from God's lips being greater than these riches and such, to me that speaks about what I was beginning to value and hope in. This may sound cold or weird, but even in my son's very life, if I put more hope in his existence or in my family, or if I put more hope in planting a church or being in the ministry or becoming a pastor, I've strayed from what's most important. For you, it's going to be something else. Maybe you're young and there's a guy or a girl that you've wanted to get with, and you thought maybe this is the one for me, and it didn't work out. Or maybe it's your marriage. Maybe your marriage is on the rocks. I'm probably the only one who experienced marital problems as well. But maybe things sometimes aren't the way they're supposed to be, and you're like, God, where are you? Fix this, like right now. Or maybe it's a job. Maybe it's a career you had hoped for. Maybe it was a class or a school that you got into. I don't know. But what I do know, what I have learned, is that God's instruction in His Word, it's not just, there's just this Bible that has instructions for us to follow. Though it does, and we should follow them. More importantly, the Bible points to a person. It points to someone. It's telling us the story of God and His pursuit for His bride. It tells us how He was afflicted for us, so that He could have us, and so that we can have Him. So I guess I could say, whenever we find ourselves defined by circumstances or finding identity in lesser things than God, I think God would want to remind you of who He is and who you are in Him. And He would say in 2 Corinthians 5:21 that He made Him for our sake to be sin who knew no sin, so that in Him we would become the righteousness of God. I can't even wrap my mind around that concept. I'm a scumbag, even as a Christian. And I'm the righteousness of God. You're the righteousness of God. We're the righteousness of God, those of us who are in Christ. So if you're here today and the world's been weighing you down, and I know it has, maybe you feel, like I said, abandoned by God, or maybe you've had hope that was just dashed and shattered into pieces. God would say, remember who I am, and remember who you are in me. Don't stray away and try to just comfort yourself and stay away from trouble. Look at them as opportunities and to go pressing into God, to go deeper with God. I'm gonna end with a quote, and it's from a guy I really like. His name's Graham Cook. And it says, when you learn the discipline of living in His presence, all the things that come against you will enable you to go deeper into God. Thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate it. Let me pray. Father, you're good. For us to ever doubt your goodness is just ridiculous, Lord. Thank you that you love us the way that you do. And I pray today that you would bless the hearts of your children right now, God, and that you would let them know who you are and your heart toward them. Let them know that they're sons and they're daughters. That's not going to ever change. God, we love you, but more importantly, thank you that you first loved us. We lift this all up in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Thanks for listening. We want to be a resource for you as you walk with Jesus. So please connect with us at radiantvisalia.com. Until next time.
There is a heavenly city that I'm compelled to find. Oh, I love the flowers and trees and the smell of the grinding sea and all the beautiful things here in life. And I